Hello, I'm Raquel Reinigal, a current master's degree student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in the Department of Second Language Studies. In this video series, we'll be covering some alternative and not so alternative approaches to second language teaching. In this particular video, we'll be covering the audio-lingual method. Let's jump on in with an overview of this not so alternative approach. The audio-lingual method has ties to the 20s where language teaching was becoming more popular, but really it started out when the military during World War II needed a lot of soldiers to be able to speak languages. They had a lot of people, they needed a lot of informants. So the military invested in language classes. The government saw the threat of Russia when it launched Sputnik, and so it encouraged universities to create more language classes. By the 1950s, psychological learning theory was growing in the field of psychology, and that translated over to applied linguists who were actually becoming more interested in teaching as well because of military influence. And so the audio-lingual method was born. This audio-lingual method was really closely linked to the oral approach and structuralist approach, as well as theories in psychology. So what does it say about language learning? Firstly, it's based on structural linguistics, which looks at language as elements that follow rules in a certain structured way. Audio-lingual method also focuses on speaking, because historically speaking came before writing in language production, and even when children learn languages, they usually learn speaking and listening first. It also includes parts of behaviorism ideals, like language is habit formation, and that's where we get the repetition and the drill type of lessons that are often in audio-lingual classrooms. Also, we can see this in lessons that have call and repeat, because that is stimulation, response, and repetition in ways that you learn a language. Also, since the goal was to sound like a native speaker, it was important that the teachers explain the culture and that the students absorb cultural knowledge so that they would be able to sound more like native speakers. Lastly, I really want to touch upon the point again that language learning is based on habit formation. So this is a lot of repetition, and by repeating things, it can become internalized and therefore used in the future. So what are some features of the audio-lingual method? First of all, in the classroom, there's no or limited use of the L1, or the first language. And this is because they want the most exposure as they can to the language. It's all about speaking and listening, right? So you want a lot of listening input. Above all, accuracy is very important. So this goes down to error correction and pronunciation. Those are always fixed because, of course, the goal is to be like a native speaker, and the native speaker may have more natural pronunciation, and their error correction may not be like an L2 speaker. The lessons are usually divided into grammar points, but these points are not actually explicitly taught. They're inductively taught. The teacher will start using the grammar point, and then students will be able to derive the meaning inductively without being explicitly taught, this is this. The language material is presented and practiced in certain ways. Of course, drills are very important. Repetition happens to be in drills and call and response. So the teacher will say one thing, like, I am Sam, and then the students will repeat, I am Sam. Or you practice the dialogue by repeating it over and over. Call and response can happen there as well. And these dialogues are memorized, and also vocabulary is memorized. A common method is to give a lot of vocabulary and memorize it and use it. Flashcards could be a part of ALM as well, looking at the front with the word and the back with the definition over and over again to hopefully memorize that and put that word into your long-term memory. So now I want to hop over to the pros and cons of using the audio-lingual method. Some of the pros are that many textbooks have components of the audio-lingual method. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of dialogue use. Those dialogues can then be repeated. It can become a drill. You can memorize a dialogue. Also, because teachers were often taught in an audio-lingual or grammar translation way, then that is most familiar to them, and therefore they may, by default, teach via the audio-lingual method. What is most familiar to us, of course, is easier to teach, and that's possibly one of the reasons why the audio-lingual method still exists to this day. Also, this repetition and this very structured line of lessons allows for teachers to use less time making materials or creating new materials. They can kind of recycle what they've used or what they're going to do in terms of activities, because they're all very structured and similar. Also, because of this structure of the classroom and of language learning, students will know what to expect in the classroom. Moving on to cons, behaviorism, which is habit formation, allows for production, was kind of discredited by applied linguistics because it was found that language learners often produce a lot more than they hear, or their variation in language use is more flexible than what we hear. Connected to a previous pro of that the students know what's coming up. On the other hand, it can be boring over time. You do the same type of activities day in and day out. Students may become bored of the lessons and feel less motivation for learning a language. And lastly, students memorize only certain types of dialogue, and these dialogues don't always replicate what happens in the real world. So this is the end of the overview of ALM. It's very short compared to the other videos in this series. So that's it for this lecture. By far, this is not all the information on this approach, and if you're interested, you should do some more research. But I hope this information will start you off on the right foot to second language teaching. Good luck, and goodbye.